My name is Lauren Megaw, and I'm with Reyna Silver Corp, a company that focuses on high-grade district-scale discovery, particularly in Nevada and Mexico.
Lauren, good to see you. I think we saw each other, crikey, it must have been back in Denver in September.
Yeah.
Saw Jorge in December. Keen to get an update from you guys. You've been raising money, and I'm intrigued as to the why. But first, can you give us a bit more detail in terms of the kind of portfolio of projects that you have?
Yeah,
if you don't mind.
So we've got 4 projects. We've got 2 projects in Nevada, 2 projects in Mexico. So the 2 projects in Nevada are the project we acquired last summer called Griffin Summit, where we get this really cool stacked gold, silver, and critical metal system. And then we also have another project there called Medicine Springs, where we think we have a full carbonate replacement deposit. Actually, 3 out of our 4 assets are CRDs.
Right.
The other CRD asset that we have down in Mexico is something called the Santa Eulalia Mining District. It's one of the world's largest CRDs. And from what we know, studying that one in particular, but CRDs worldwide, we're missing half the system. It produced 500 million ounces of silver. Where's the other half? And then, because you want to have icing on your cake, we also have Batopilas, which is the famous native silver district in Mexico. And that's the thing that just, when I say native silver, like the main ore mineral there was native, like pure silver. And so that's another one that we've been working on. Moving forward the 4 projects, and really excited to be focusing on Griffin for this summer.
Right, and I'm keen to hear all about it. But just for the uninitiated, perhaps people new to the story, carbonate replacement deposits. What's the big deal about them?
Yeah,
CRD?
So CRDs are these. I mean, some of the world's largest deposits are from the carbonate replacement deposit continuum. So typically, like, people have described deposits based off of what crapped out on surface. So if it was a porphyry that showed up, it's a porphyry system. If it's a skarn, it's a skarn. If it's a massive sulfide, so high-grade silver, lead, zinc, chimney manto, CRD system. That's actually all part of a continuum. And one of the cool things that's happening right now is this ability to understand that because it's part of a continuum, because it's part of a full system, there can be big sections of these that are undercover. Or maybe they're showing up at places that you weren't expecting. And why CRDs are exciting is they can be very high grade with really good metallurgy recovery because of how they form. And then on top of that, like, there can be a really good relationship between size and grade. So a really big system can also be carrying really high grade because of how they form, because of these repeated overprinted events. The longer lived, the more mineralized the system, bigger it gets, higher grade it gets, which essentially boils down to these things can make a lot of money. You see these really big CRDs in Mexico or China. I mean, they're worldwide. Wherever you see a carbonate, which is essentially limestone, dolostone, very ancient, dead biologics, deep ocean systems. So essentially, if you think about how much of Earth is covered by ocean now, historically, you've also had similar amount of coverage. So wherever that is, the rock that's forming there is carbonate. So you get these big systems. And you essentially have a porphyry, which you normally associate with the copper or gold. It comes in. You get acidic mineralized fluid coming off of that. It goes into fractures in the rock. It reacts with that carbonate. You get your papier-mâché volcano acid-base reaction, the baking soda and the vinegar. The pH changes and the metals drop out. And that happens again and again. And so you get these marvelously economic systems. I mean, you can get your silver and your lead and your zinc, and then they're self-scavenging. So when the system forms, if there's something exciting, some extra little critical metal that's hanging around, it will concentrate it within the system as well. So sometimes you see these CRDs that are elevated in indium or germanium or cobalt or nickel. And so you look at that and, it's one of the reasons why we're excited about our Griffin project is we think we have all the features stacked on top of each other because the structures that's used for the CRD mineralization can be used for later mineralizing events as well. So like with our Griffin project, we see the CRD style mineralization, but we also have Carlin type mineralization. So there you had the potential of having like the gold kicker as well.
Okay. You're excited. I get it. I heard big and polymetallic. And therefore, hopefully the economics come with that. But just if I can step back for a second there, because, sometimes portfolio companies, it's a bit of a liability to have multiple assets trying on the go when you're a small company, because you got to finance those things in a market like we've just come off the back of for gold and silver. It's been especially tough. But for you guys, you've kind of got that added layer of the Mexican elections and Mexican politicians posturing and causing all sort of doubt in the marketplace. You've been able to go up to Nevada. I guess you're looking at that as a plus at the moment.
Oh, yeah. I mean, here's the thing. The projects that we have in Mexico are amazing. If you're going for silver projects, you go to Mexico. On top of that, though, like a stool is more stable with 4 legs than with 2 or even 3, right? And one of the things that was, when we first went public, we picked up Medicine Springs. And then last year, in part because of where the markets have been, that's when the really great projects pop loose. And that's how Gigi and Badapilas popped loose. That's how Griffin was able to pop loose. And we were able to take advantage of that and say, hey, people aren't giving us the love for the Mexican projects. We own them 100%. We can continue to work on them and develop like a really good quiver of drill targets. I mean, we've got some smokers on both of those projects. But we can also take advantage of the Nevada as well.
Right. And like, I hear you on the Mexican thing, and I think everyone in Mexico is in the same boat at the moment. So can you just quickly on Mexico, so we can park it up for now. So are you still continuing to advance it on the ground in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah. So we're working on those targets. Like we're doing like optimized geophysics on our the Gigi project. So we're doing AI optimization. That's where we got this really cool drill target from. Badapilas, we've been doing some additional field work because we found this gold mineralization. So, hey, let's spend some time, do this stuff that everyone finds boring and doesn't care about when the market's good. That allows us to really put those things together, because we think at some point it's going to shift in terms of perception of Mexico, and then we'll be ready to go. Okay,
right. So Mexico, good asset, sitting there waiting for, I guess, clarity from the elections, and we'll see how the market reacts to that as and when. But let's bounce up to Nevada at the moment. Okay, so the focus is on Griffin, or has been on Griffin, certainly when we last talked to the company. This year, will you continue to put your efforts there?
Yeah, so we'll be starting a drill program here this summer. I was actually just out at site working, with our relationships with the BLM, checking in, seeing how the pieces are falling together, getting, camp all set up, getting the team ready to deploy, get the additional field work that we wanted to get done to really bring some clarity. We just re-logged all of the core. So this project came with 23 existing core holes. We brought in the team, Reyna Ramirez, my father, Peter Megaw, some other Carlin-based geologists as well, put the team together and logged the whole thing like it was new to us. And it brought some really cool new insights that are going to really help us with targeting. Okay,
so on the money side, you've made a series of announcements over raising money in the market. I'm sure you didn't. Not a case of having to make that choice of, do you raise now because it kind of feels dilutive compared to where you've been in the marketplace, or the necessity of, we've got to get this thing moving and prove up that we've got something. You got to make that discovery, right? So,
yeah.
What was the sort of debate internally around how you did and how much you went for?
Yeah, so I mean, the debate internally was largely based off of like, okay, how many meters do we need at Griffin to be able to do proof of concept, which will allow us to then go raise share price, re-rate, and then really go after it. How do you do that? How do you create that environment? And, we essentially determined we need to do about 3,000 meters. And so we went to go raise for that. We obviously wanted to have some buffer as well. So that way we could time the next, raise properly so that you're not up against the wall. Right. And so, we did the raise in February based off of that. And then more recently, we had a group that approached us that said, hey, we really wanted to participate in the last financing, but the timing wasn't working. We weren't able to. Now we really want to get in. And we're going to hit you over the head with a bag of money. And we said, okay, because what that allows us to do is do those extra drill holes that we really wanted to do, but we felt could be sort of the second stage ones. So that allows us to do those pieces and put that all together. So it's really going to make like the drill program this summer at Griffin, exploring each one of the proof of concepts that we need to do, because there's so many elements to Griffin. One of the questions is, okay, where do we focus? How do we really hone in on where the main feeders are, where the main structures are? And this drill program in this raise is going to allow us to do that.
Right. Okay. So and that's Griffin and Madison Springs. I know you put out some numbers, pre-Christmas, etc. But is there much happening there in terms of on the drill front, or is it all going to be Griffin?
So for right now, we're focusing just on Griffin because we decided, like, based off of a company with where the market's at, like, let's focus on the project that, yes, it's newest to us, but simultaneously, it's the most advanced project we have. It's got the most data. It's got the most where we think we're, within a drill hole of hitting something pretty significant. So let's focus on that one for right now. But we're going to be doing some mapping and generative work at Madison Springs as the mapping program at Griffin winds down. That same team can then go to Madison, and then we can have those targets honed up for Madison as well for when the market shifts.
Okay, so explain to me this, because it's you are and your old man and the rest of the team. They want to do things the right way. They are good geologists. You've got something good going on at Griffin here. You're gonna want to do things the right way, but sometimes the right way in the market is hard for the market to interpret. So what are the things that you think are going to be really important for being able to help you make a discovery, which may not be we're going to drill the guts of this thing day one, which is what the market always seems to want on these things. It's harder than that. There's a process in place. So can you kind of talk me through the components which you think are kind of critical and what you would define success as looking like at the end of that?
So, one of the cool things that came out of, relogging all the old drill core, we came to the realization that historically the main structures, so the routes of mineralization, which in CRDs is what you aim for, have only been the target twice out of 23 holes. They've only been hit once. And when they hit good mineralization. So we said, okay, let's aim for, from a CRD perspective, like the obviously well-mineralized structures. So, one of the things we'll be doing right off the bat is seeing whether or not, okay, based on what we see at surface, these structures are incredibly well-mineralized. What happens when we go to depth? Let's test that, test the orientation, see what happens with those. And if our idea that structures carry mineralization translates. We have a structure that we put out a press release out about Agnico that had like a 1.5 meters that ran almost 9 grams gold. That's one of the things we're going to be following up on, because essentially the structure is like this and they clip the side of it, and that's the side that ran the high grade. So, that's one of the things that we're going to be, in some ways you can think of that as a geology question needing to be answered and simultaneously a market question that needs to be answered. Then one of the other targets that we're going to be going for is we have this area that runs 11.6% copper. So there's all of these structures that are running 5 to almost 12% copper in this one area that's in a patented claim zone. And it's also got elevated silver and zinc and all of this stuff. And it hasn't been a target previously. And so we're going, well, duh, excuse me. But like, that's kind of our idea is let's go after that, because if we can understand, what the mineralogy there is, that will help us kind of vector our way through the system. And then on top of that, like the drill rigs never turned east on this project. And that's where the historic CRD mineralization and production was. So we'll be looking to the east as well. And so that's a big question where that hasn't been drilled before, but based off of what we see at surface, this is cool. And so, we get to take the other targets have been tested in some regards. Granted, not at the structure, but sort of like the next to them parts. And so we get to build off of other people's targeting and say, yeah, let's take this CRD approach. Let's go after the big structures and see what that yields us here in Nevada. So essentially take the style of exploration that led to so much success for Mag Silver or the discovery of Platosa, bring that team up and see if we're right at Griffin, right in the heart of Carlin.
Right. Okay. So, crikey, a lot on the to-do list.
Yeah. Sorry, I get too excited about this.
No, I can tell, and that's kind of appealing in the sense that some people go into these things just full of hope, and I'm not quite sure what they're trying to do or what they're going to find. I guess they're going to find, but it applies to us all. But because we used to, obviously with Mexico we associated with silver. With Griffin, you have talked about gold and silver, both of those back on trend. Back those trending again. See, social media parlance. But the kind of critical minerals side of things, nickel and copper as well. When you talk about 11% copper, I mean, what type of system are you looking at there? So that's kind of super unusual.
I guess to take a step back, talking about carbonate replacement deposits, they're associated with porphyries. So essentially, like your porphyry, which you normally associate with copper or gold, like that's the source of these things. Take a step further back, because this will be easier to explain if I take a little moment to explain CRDs. I'm going to try to translate geologists into English here real quick. So like you have your source porphyry, and you can think of that as like your bus terminal. And coming off of that, those structures, those fractures in the rock, those are like your bus routes, right? And your acidic mineralized fluid that's coming out of your source porphyry, that's like a bus leaving, fully loaded with metals. And different elements get off in different neighborhoods. So when you're close to your source porphyry, you're in your downtown area, right? Near your bus terminal, that's your higher copper, gold, lead, zinc. Your silver's a little lower than it is outboard, but it's voluminous because you're downtown. As you make your way further out in the system and you get into the CRDs, the Chimney-Manto systems, like that's more like your suburbs. Your silver grade goes way up along with your lead, zinc, and then whatever your scavenged critical metals are. And at the very end, the elements that fell asleep on the back of the bus get kicked out. Those are our trace elements. So when you see a bunch more copper mineralization tells you, because it's related to higher temperature, copper doesn't want to get too far from, it doesn't want to be in the bus for too long, essentially. So when you see copper mineralization, like what we see down in the Sadler area, one of the things that we're excited about is, okay, that potentially tells us that we're getting closer to that skarn or the source of the mineralization. It might also explain why we see so much gold in this area as well. So, that's one of the ideas is let's test this target where we have these structures, and maybe that will let us also better understand, like, where is it all coming from? Because you get a whole bunch, they kind of look like trees or like a river delta, but reversed. And so, with the CRD system, if you can figure out where the edges are, and you can figure out where the source is, you can work the two against each other to find that more voluminous skarn or your more voluminous part of your Chimney-Manto system. So the fact that we've got these kind of high-grade gold or copper mineralization is an indicator that, like, okay, maybe we're dealing with higher temperature, closer to source. Let's figure out what that is, because that's never been a target. But for us, like, from a vectoring standpoint, it's a target. And then there's always the little fun X factor with porphyries, which is that, they can also be their own special thing as well.
They can be, and I guess it tends to it tends to be associated with also big, expensive, drill programs as well. And at some point, small companies tend to try to bring in a strategic partner.
If we find a porphyry, strategic partners will come knocking on our door. Let's be real here. We're in the middle of the biggest companies are around us. Our focus is on the CRD mineralization and potentially the gold. But if we find something that is, crazy scalable, then that's when you bring in a strategic on something.
I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to hand you over very quickly to Merlin here, because I want him to talk through the CRD stuff with you. And maybe we can, between you geologists, can allow us to perhaps explain it to people in, I say, simpler terms in English later today. So let me hand you over to Merlin.
Thanks, Matt. So, Lauren, CRD deposits, but particularly let's talk about Griffin. And for my benefit, just remind me where we are in the terms of kind of the understanding of Griffin.
Yeah, so our understanding of Griffin is that historically the focus has been on the Carlin-type gold mineralization that's there. I mean, it makes sense. You're right there between the Carlin Trend and the Battle Mountain Eureka Trend, gold mega districts. That's where your focus is going to be, and that's where your expertise is going to be. We are lucky to be able to bring in some of the world's preeminent CRD experts from projects in Mexico up to Griffin, because historically speaking, there are two CRD producing mining districts within the Griffin Summit claim blocks. So you have both the Mineral Hill district as well as the Union Summit district. And the cool thing about this is those have been largely ignored or sort of cast aside as, oh, those are just sulfides. Those are just, base metals and silver. And we get to take a look at that as well as, and because CRD mineralization is so structurally controlled, I mean, most systems are, but it allows us to follow this more dramatic, gaudy looking surface mineralization and structural expression to understand the system as a whole. And hopefully that will let us understand not just the CRD Chimney-Manto portion of the system, but all the way back through to the porphyry driver and even the Carlin system as well.
And as I understand it, you've got about 133 RC holes into the Griffin project and 23 historic, 20, I'm not sure, in the 20s number of kind of diamond holes. Yep. Are those, do any of those hit the CRD mineralization, or is most of that into the kind of the Carlin style mineralization?
So that was all focused, like the 133 RC holes have like an average depth of 55 meters. That's an enthusiastic soil sampling program. It was all focused in sort of this, well, it was primarily focused in this northern area called Bruffy Canyon, where we get surface samples that run 0.1 to a gram gold everywhere. That looks like it's probably a hot springs deposit. We might take a look at that in more detail later on, but it's not an initial focus for us. But, one of the crazy things to us coming from a CRD point of view is historically the focus in this district, they haven't gone after the big structures. I mean, you have these structures that are running 3 to 35% zinc and, upwards of 2,000 grams silver and, up to 40% lead. I mean, just crazy numbers along these structures. And those have not been the targets. The targets have been historically stratigraphic or logic, interpreted horizons as being, that should be the best horizon type for a Carlin system. And so our idea is to go after the structures, because that is what's primarily honest.
If we can just kind of step it back a bit, Carlin, the Carlin deposits are famous for kind of gold permeating or fluids permeating through a certain stratigraphic horizon or a favorable host rock, which has got these kind of broad gold grades through them. And correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, CRD deposits are hydrothermal fluids coming from some heat source and some metal source, migrating up fluid pathways, typically structure, interacting, and then a certain point of temperature and pressure and chemistry, which is the carbonate rocks, which are alkali or and less acidic. Well, they're alkali. They interact with the acid or acidic fluids coming up, and it is the neutralization of that fluid which causes the replacement of the carbonate, the dolomite or the limestone, and the precipitation of sulfides. Is that roughly it?
Yeah, that's roughly it. I mean, it's a replacement reaction that happens again and again. And, to us, one of the things that we're excited to do is go after those structures. Because one of the other things is you can also see in Carlin systems it follows the plumbing as well before it hits those stratigraphic shatter zones. And so our idea is, if you think of there's a big time gap, an interpreted time gap between the CRD mineralization and the Carlin mineralization. And one of our ideas is, if we can understand the CRD mineralization, maybe that will allow us to better understand the underlying plumbing that allowed the fluid that then pervades in as the Carlin fluid. You still need to find those main structures that are carrying things. And that might also allow us to better understand what's going on with the Carlin style mineralization as well. Because what's been done so far isn't narrowing it in quickly enough.
How are you going to, broad brush, how are you going to explore for this? So are you going to be mapping the structures? Are you going to do geophysics for structure and or sulfides? Are you going to do geochemistry? What are your, on the three main levers that you've got to play with, what's the broad brush approach?
So we're essentially doing those three. We get to build upon the fact that historically there's about 4,000 samples of this project that have been assayed. And so we're taking a relook at all of that geochemistry. In addition to that, we're taking the mapping that was focused on the gold style alteration. We're going to go do some detailed work in the areas where we see the really gaudy lead, zinc, silver alteration mineralization, as well as the copper mineralization. So we'll do I think we're going to do 1 to 50 scale. And then on top of that, we also going to build upon a bunch of historic geophysics that was done. So we'll be working with Explore Tech on some AI optimization of that. And then because of the development in hyperspectral and the resolution there, we'll probably be doing some hyperspectral as well. The idea being that we can now get that identification of those different, it's another geophysical tool that we can use that will allow us to highlight some of the alteration.
So as I understand, or my limited understanding of CRD deposits, is that you get these pulses of hydrothermal activity, and you get a concentration where the carbonates are being neutralized and the reaction causing the precipitation. So this is where you can get these kind of quite high grade ore zones. Historically, it's been quite easy to drill nearby and to think that you've missed it.
But that has changed in the last about 20 years. And a large part of that comes down to work that's been done in carbon isotopes. So you can start seeing that there's an isotopic change. That gets a little bit more complicated, but on a more simple level, you can use ultraviolet light, so black light, on the core. And when you are close to or even when you're at the sort of replacement fronts, you end up with the core goes bright pink. The rocks go bright pink. You can map it in a couple of different ways, whether it's through the carbon isotopes. You can start identifying near misses using ultraviolet light on the core. And when it starts going sort of this, if you have a low iron system, it starts going pink orange. It looks like barbecue coals, so we call it barbecue rock. Realistically, what it is, it's fugitive calcite. So when you have that replacement reaction, as you were talking about earlier, that acidic mineralized fluid interacting with the carbonate, the metals drop out, but carbonate goes back into the solution, and then you get hitchhikers that come along with that. So you get some iron, you get lead, and you get manganese, and lead and manganese end up having a fluorescent response. And so that's what gets you that hot pink. So when the core could look super boring, but when you hit it with a UV light, boom, it goes pink, and you go, okay, I'm close. And you can actually track that complexity back into the system. So the more you see that, the closer you are.
How close? So
you can see it. I mean, there have been cases of, this requires some vectoring in. The fugitive calcite can be up to a kilometer away and within meters. But you can see the differences between the two. So that really distal looking fugitive calcite looks very different from the stuff that's next door. And so much of that has to do with seeing repeated events over printing. So you end up kind of tracking that, how much fugitive calcite, how many events are on top of each other. And that allows you to then work your way back. We can use this argentiferous manganese oxide mineralization, or AMOM. So this black sort of dendrites that ends up being sort of a halo that surrounds the system. And so that's another thing that we're going to use that hyperspectral for is, okay, can we figure out where the edges of these things are and work our way in? And that's one of the reasons why we're particularly excited about one of our targets that we've discovered for this summer.
And it's a hyperspectral signature. And do you use other pathfinders like arsenic or antimony or bismuth?
Oh, yeah. I mean, bismuth, you see a closer to source, tungsten as well. We track cadmium. We track the transition in the mineralogy for, whether it's the zinc mineralogy, and even the color change in the zinc mineralogy. So as you get closer towards temperature, the zinc is carrying more iron, or the sphalerite is carrying more iron, so it gets darker. And these are all the different. It's really the combination of the factors. And so rather than getting focused on just one, you're essentially looking for where things get, I know it's a scary word, but more and more complex. Because the more complex it gets, the more that's happened, that's telling you you're getting closer to the mineralization itself, because that's what you care about. You're looking for a long-lived system to get big.
So it's basically a zoned anomalies.
Yes.
And the signature is weak and attenuated at a distance away from the main part of the action, and the more complexity, the more overlayering of anomalies, the closer you are to the center of things.
And one of the things we're lucky with in CRDs is the alteration can be pretty gaudy. And so, we get to take advantage of that. I mean, there are structures at Griffin that you can stand on that are highly anomalous in lead, zinc, silver, a lot of the other trace elements that we're looking for. And those things go for kilometers. And my favorite one, the closest drill hole was almost 2 kilometers away. So, we've got some targets that from a CRD perspective, we go, this is target, this is priority target, but from a gold perspective, wasn't considered a priority target. So, we're excited to be able to take advantage of that, use all the historic data. I mean, we just did a full recomb of all the information that's been gathered here. We went through all the old drill core, and that's going to allow us to build upon what's been done previously, so we don't have to go and reinvent the wheel. But we've got a nice foundation to start from.
Now, I never like companies that put a commodity in their company name. I think that pinning yourself to a single commodity is a folly, because you never know what you're going to find. If you were called Reyna Minerals, do you think that would give you more latitude to look for zinc and lead and gold? Or
I think our name might be Reyna Silver. That predates me starting with Reyna Silver. And I will say, our focus will always be on silver-related mineralization. However, if we find a giant Carlin system, I am totally okay with that. We're not going to be like, oh no, woe is me, we found crazy high-grade zinc or gold or whatever it happens to be. We're a silver company. We can't do that. No, we will follow the geology. That's
and it may be silver rich and it may not be.
Yeah. I mean, but when you look at the biggest systems in the world, they are multi-part systems, right? You get these overprinting. I mean, gosh, you even look at our Bada Pilas project, which is historically Mexico's famous native silver district. I mean, the system was and is world-renowned from a mineral collector point of view because of the pure native silver specimens that came out of there. The main ore was native silver. We went in there as the silver exploration company into a district where the Spanish went in looking for gold and found high-grade silver. Said, okay, we can do all this. We went in there and we started finding gold. And we didn't say, oh no, this is gold, we can't do gold. We said, okay, what does the gold tell us about this system as a whole? What happens when, as we step 1.5 kilometers out of the historic center of focus, we start finding gold mineralization? How can we now use this to understand the full Bada Pilas mineralized system? We leveraged that allowed us to find more silver. In a lot of ways, that's one of the things that we're looking to do at Griffin is let's understand the system as a whole. Yes, our focus is on, and our expertise has been in silver mineralization, but we're not going to let that distract us from trying to understand the full forest. We're not going to get too focused on a little stand of trees. We want to look at the whole thing, because that's how you make major discoveries. That's how you move the dial. And I'm really lucky to be working with an exploration team that has repeatedly done that and been able to find monster deposits by doing it. So.
Well, Lauren, thank you very much. I may disagree with your choice of name for the company, but that's a small thing. Good luck with the exploration, and thanks for talking to me about Griffin and CRD deposits.
Well, thank you so much, Merlin. Appreciate it.